All right, Arch15, welcome back, and we are ready for our first exam. You are ready for your first exam. I'm going to be releasing the slide. It's really one slide, one graphic, as I mentioned, and there are four projects. I'm going to build into this lecture a review without using the names of any of the projects of some of the elements that I expect you to at least touch on, depending on which of the four projects you select. I want to highlight some, not with specific focus. I'm not going to give you all of the answers, certainly, but I'm going to call attention to the key attributes of each of the four projects that if you select any one of those four, I expect you to at least focus in on a couple of those things using vocabulary that we've developed so far from the lectures and on the vocabulary sheet that I've posted to Canvas and shared with you all. And based on the notes that you have taken or things that you remember or specifically jotted down in your notes or other things you found from your specifically calling out things that we've talked about in the lectures or things that you have found in doing your own research on any of those projects that may have piqued your interest outside of the lectures, or referencing things that you read in the book about any one of those four projects. And again, you only have to write about one. The format is exactly the reason I had you do this essay in the beginning of the semester right away was really to get into the habit of writing in that format, being able to identify the character defining features quickly and formulating an opinion and good architectural working vocabulary to describe the elements that you're identifying. So really the process, as I mentioned in probably the first lecture, the process of trusting your eyes and then slowing down your mind enough to find the words to describe what your eyes are seeing and really ultimately what you're feeling that the work is intended to do, what emotions and what effects is the architect trying to convey or produce through the work that he or she, although we haven't seen work of any female architects yet, we certainly will, that he or she is trying to create. I did finish grading all of the essays. Very good job, really across the board. There were a few that I can kind of tell either had not watched the lectures or didn't clearly understand the instructions, and either were writing about something entirely different altogether than Santa Maria del Fiore, or just misunderstood that the building was Brunelleschi's Santa Maria del Fiore. But outside of those three or four out of the 40 or so, I was actually very impressed. So I commend you all with your efforts on writing in your first attempt at doing this. And I can tell from the essay that the exams are going to be very good as well. So what I did say I would do, and I'm willing to do now, is I'm going to read an example of really an exemplary essay from a prior class, as well as I pulled one from this class so far. And I'm just going to read it out loud and kind of stop and point out some of the things that I think the student is doing really well, that I would like to see all of you be doing by the midpoint of the semester for sure, hopefully over the next couple weeks. If not on this exam, then definitely on the next exam. I'd love to see all of you writing at this level, and it's totally attainable because it's not, doesn't require hundreds and thousands of hours of architectural studies to get to this point. Trust me, at this stage in your college careers, you have already the ability to formulate the description and the ideas. You certainly all have the ability to look at the work and formulate a response to the work just by being yourselves. And I'm giving you the vocabulary terms. So as long as you're looking at the vocabulary terms and you understand what those terms are, combining that with the first two, everybody in this class certainly has the ability to earn a high grade on all of the essays in the future as well as the exams. Okay, this is from a prior semester, and it was one of the highest scores. This was actually on a final, which was scored at 500 points, and this student earned 481 points. I believe this was the highest score that semester on the final exam. I see a side view plan of a portico and a rotunda. The portico looks about the third of the size of the rotunda and much simpler. So I want to stop right there already. There's use of two strong terms that I don't remember if they were on the vocabulary sheet or not, but the student is demonstrating to me that she understands what a portico is clearly, and understands what a rotunda is. So there's right away use of architectural vocabulary that shows a deeper understanding than just general insight and knowledge. And the third thing that I was impressed by in these first two sentences already is the reference to proportion. So she's saying that she's not giving me dimensions. She's not saying it's 145 meters across, etc., or it's 45 meters tall. And she's writing about the Pantheon, and I know she's writing about the Pantheon only from her writing. There's nothing on here. Maybe later she will reference it as the Pantheon. But I know that's what she's writing about already just from her two sentences. I don't have to look any further than that. But also, as I was mentioning, the reference to scale is very healthy. That she's saying that the portico is about the third the size of the rotunda. So relationship. All throughout this site, there are hypostyle columns and halls and entablatures, separating the portico from its columns and the dome from its ground plane. I see sections of threes in these separations that divide this piece of architectural perfectly. So she's getting into order, she's getting into organization, and she's getting into rhythm. All very good, keen observations about the architecture that she's looking at. I feel this temple was beyond its time. Not only is it the best preserved ancient structure to this day due to its mystery concrete ingredients, it is mathematical perfection. Inside the rotunda, there is a perfect equidistant space for a cylindrical sphere matching the diameter to the height, making this coffered dome space perfect. However, when outside and walking through the forum, past the fluted colonnade and towards the portico, the perfect dome isn't visible from that vantage point, creating a shock factor when actually stepping out past the plinth and into this overwhelming open space. So there's a repetition of use of terms, which is very good, which she also did in the first paragraph. But the thing I want to point out in in the second part that I think is outstanding work, it's actually something that I even commented on many of your respective essays. The first statement actually, I would say, lost maybe 3 or 4 points. It says this temple was beyond its time. That's a real good, powerful statement. Nothing wrong with that. What I expect somebody to say when they say this temple is beyond its time, I expect at least one follow-up sentence explaining why you are making that observation. 9 out of 10 times, I'm not even going to challenge whether that observation in this section is valid or not valid, because really I'm asking you, how does this architectural solution, or how does this work make you feel? What is the what are the things that would be going through your mind if you were inside of this space observing it? And so I'm not really going to take a position on what you may be feeling. What I'm looking for, though, is when you say this is how this might make me feel, or this is how this space reads to me, which is really what I'm asking you when I say feel. I want you to follow up and substantiate that. So I would say in this first part, it's actually minus a few points. This temple is beyond its time. It's a good statement. There's a lot of things you can say about this that make it beyond its time, whether it's the unreinforced concrete of the dome, whether it's the rounded surface. These are not things that we were commonly doing in 100 middle of the second century. So that could have been substantiated, and it wasn't. So there's a little bit of loss of points there. But later on, when she says, however, when outside, okay, so she says, making this coffered dome space perfect. She's talking about the coffering on the inside of the dome, which is excellent. She talked about the proportion of height to width being 1-to-1. That's excellent. I know I talk about that in the lecture for sure, so that shows me that she was paying attention. However, when outside and walking through the forum, past the fluted colonnade and towards the portico, the perfect dome isn't visible from that vantage point. So when she talks about the notion of mystery, she introduces the idea of awe, but she also follows up by basically saying that part of why I think it would feel that way is because if I was outside on the street approaching the Pantheon, approaching the front portico and the pediment, I would actually not have a sense of the grand rotunda that is actually behind it. So I thought that was excellent. And then the last part, this is an important work of architecture because it was a statement piece. When it was rebuilt around 126 BCE, first by the Emperor Trajan and then later finished by the Emperor Hadrian, this was a building of victory. Around the same time, ancient Rome had defeated Cleopatra from Egypt and wanted to symbolize their defeat. In doing so, the architect, Marcus Agrippa, incorporated columns, arches, and other belongings from Egypt into the structure of the Pantheon, declaring power over the defeated neighbors. Not only is this building mathematical perfection, it was the largest rotunda of its time during its build. Talk about declaration of power. So a really strong close that has factual statements, citing the date, citing the person who helped commission the project. And in this case, we don't know who the architect was, but had there been, they would have, I trust 100% that this student would have cited that in that last paragraph. So again, I'm not, I don't harp on you telling me exactly the date that it was built, but through your writing, I want you to prove to me that you're paying attention, you know the building, you know the architect, and you know why it's relevant historically and why we're studying it in this class, other than the fact that it's in the book and it's in my lectures and I've told you it's important. That's great, but I want you to know why it's important, not just that because it's a part of this class. Okay, that's an example. There's one more, and I'll read actually this one from this class. And I won't use the student's name because... Oh, actually, no, I did ask permission, and the student said, no, I don't mind if you read it. Okay, so this is Ruben. Ruben Debine submitted this essay. I don't remember exactly the score. It actually doesn't matter. It was an outstanding essay. Okay, I see the cathedral. Make sure the camera's here. Okay. I see, and I'll go to share screen. Okay. Ruben says, I see the cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore, with its grand octagonal dome designed and built by Filippo Brunelleschi overlooking the Florence skyline. I mean, three great things to start his essay off. He's telling me he knows this is Santa Maria del Fiore. He's telling me that four really good things. He's telling me about the octagonal dome that's basically understanding how to read geometry and showing me clearly that he understands this building is special, not so much because of its Romanesque walls and early construction, but really because of the dome. That's why we're studying it. And it's early Renaissance because of Brunelleschi's work of the dome and his innovations involved in that, not so much for the rest of the church. So he's showing me already that he understands that. And overlooking the Florence skyline. So he's positioning the building in the world. He's telling me he understands it's in Florence, Italy. Wonderful. With a mixture of Gothic and all'antica details he added to the exterior, including Corinthian half columns, this showed a superior understanding of ancient monuments. Now, depending on where, so again, a couple of really good things, mixture of Gothic and all'antica. So it's referencing the Gothic, it's actually the Romanesque cathedral that the dome is sitting on top of, but he's making a separation and putting that in a different time space in the Gothic era or in the Romanesque era, separating it from the all'antica details, which are the Renaissance, the paying homage to the ancients detailing that Brunelleschi has introduced, whether it's the lantern, the belvedere, the ribs on the columns, the dome itself, or any of the surrounding apses and appurtenances that have been added. Shows a superior understanding of the ancient monuments. The dome was built using innovative double shell technique that had parallel walls with a skeletal support system hidden between the walls. So he's also telling me already in the first paragraph he understands part of the reason why this building is important is because of the engineering marvel, or really the architectural construction marvel that Brunelleschi was able to envisage here at Santa Maria del Fiore. I feel, when I see the cathedral, a feeling of being in the presence of something great washes over me. The viewer's attention is brought up towards a painting that covers the interior ceiling of the dome called the Last Judgment. The painting, illuminated by the natural light coming through the center oculus and the windows around the tholobate, create a sense of a godly presence over the crossing. Similar to the earlier essay I wrote, I think the start is actually here a little bit weak. When I see the cathedral, a feeling of being in the presence of something great washes over me. That's a great first sentence, but I don't see why Ruben is saying that a feeling of being in the presence of something great washes over him. Is it because of the next line and the paintings? Is it because of the scale? Is it because of the way light is brought into the space? Is it because of the adornment and the decoration? I don't know. It could be it could be any one of those things, or it could be other things. I want you to basically stay in that moment. When you have an initial observation in this second part, try and ask yourself, why do I have that observation? What is it that is making me say this? It's a really good thing that you guys are able to say this, because people struggle with this a lot. But the fact that you're able to say that I have this feeling of being in the presence of something magnificent washes over, then explain what you think it might be, what characteristic elements, what physical elements, what architectural elements are contributing to that. Viewers' attention is brought up towards a painting that covers the interior dome. That's great. What is it that's drawing your attention up? Is it the curvature on the inside? Where clearly in this statement you're on the inside. So what is it on the inside that's actually drawing your attention up? Is it just the sheer color and the contrast and the beauty of the artwork, which is fine, But really, what I'm looking for is it something about the form and the shell? Is it about the octagon transitioning into a curved interior? Is that what's drawing your eye up? Is the light drawing your eye up? Is the arrangement of the windows drawing your eye up? I'd like to know a little bit more about why you have that feeling. The other thing is there's two references, at least in this paragraph, on art. I don't mind the references on art. I really actually appreciate the references on art. But some of you went a little bit too heavy on the art and almost like dedicated one of these entire 3 paragraphs to describing to me the artwork. And that's great, but I don't want you to spend the whole paragraph on that. If you want to make a reference to it, I don't mind at all. In fact, I encourage it, but I don't want too many references to the art. I want you to be able to focus on the architectural elements. But it finishes strong. The painting illuminated by the natural light coming through the center oculus. So he's telling me he understands what that thing is called at the top of the dome, the center oculus, and windows around the tholobate. He understands where the tholobate is, create a sense of godly presence over the crossing. So that's interesting. That idea of natural light coming down to him denotes the notion of the presence of God, and that's a wonderful follow up to that insight. Okay, and the last one, Filippo used pairs of Corinthian half columns between the tribunes shell cap niches, which was unheard of in Brunelleschi's time. The lantern capping the dome was completed after the death of Brunelleschi, was fitted with classical fluted pilasters and reversed curve volutes. The overall concept for the dome was inspired by the 12th century baptistry of San Giovanni. So really good close, using more vocabulary terms, referencing the Corinthian half columns, referencing the lantern, and even telling me a little bit about the fact that the project was completed after Brunelleschi's death, which is good factual information. And the reverse curve volutes that he's describing at the lantern up at the top. So excellent. So good job. Again, there were a few examples like this, and I think I tried commenting when I read a really, really good essay, but for the most part, all of the essays were well written, and some were outstanding, and where I thought they were outstanding, I'll let you know. So thank you very much for that first effort, and good work, all of you. Now, let me try to do a quick review for you for the exam. Okay, these are the slides, or this is the slide with the 4 projects. Let me make this a little smaller so it's not interfering. Okay, so what you're looking at here are is your first exam, and by the time you're watching this lecture, the file is available on Canvas, also available in the announcement, and you guys have basically 24 hours. I think the assignment it's about 10:55. I'm recording this. The assignment is going to open up at midnight, and I believe you have until 11:59 tomorrow night to complete the assignment. So there's about a 24-hour period, plenty of time. Really, this shouldn't take more than an hour for anyone to do. The exercise is simple. The format is very much like the essay that I just read, with a minor additional requirement, which I'll get to in a second. But really, the core of the assignment is to identify one of these 4 projects that you're seeing here on screen, all of which I've lectured about, all of which are in the book, and all of which you should know by now what they are. You just have to pick one, and you have to write the essay. I see, I feel, and this is important and relevant to us in architecture because. I will also have posted the blank exam form on Canvas that you can utilize, and I accepted any format that it was submitted in. Really, I didn't have any trouble with any of the formatting. Some of you, looks like, probably on a tablet, you're actually writing on the PDF and then saving it and sending it. That's great. That works fine. Some of you have downloaded and typed in there in Microsoft Word or any word processor. That's fine. Others of you have taken it and modified it in maybe Illustrator or InDesign, and that's fine as well. The key is just get the writing to me before the deadline in a format that I can clearly read, whether it's handwritten or computer generated. I don't mind. It's up to you. The one difference on the exam from the essay is that on the exam, I require you to use at least 3 of the vocabulary terms from the terms that I've issued to you thus far. That is also on Canvas in the files subdirectory. I believe I posted a lecture specifically going over only the exam terms. And I do want to have that handy. Pardon me just a moment here while I find that. I already pulled it. So that's the exam, not the exam, but the terminology or the vocabulary. That's on the files folder. I want you to use at least 3 of these words in your writing. Basically, your way of proving to me that you understand what these terms are and you can use them in the proper context. Okay, I'm going to start with one bit that whether you choose to write about this project or not, there's one very important thing that I left out in discussing this building, which again, I'm not going to cite the name of it, but where so we talked about the rustication, we talked about the tripartite facade, the 3-part facade, we talked about the biforum windows, we talked about the voussoirs. I don't think I mentioned this bit. This is a kind of a minor, just insightful note, not an important thing. But these are considered, Michelangelo did these windows here on the corner, and they're considered the kneeling windows, in part because of the corbels or the brackets that are installed that look like the windows are a kneeling person. I thought that was kind of fitting because we're studying humanism and the humanist beginnings of the Renaissance. But that's not the one important piece that I would not feel good leaving this class this semester having not at least pointed out this one key attribute of this project, in addition to the things that we've already talked about, the rustication, the trabeated, the look of the trabeated structure, the biforum windows, the deep pediment, the rustication, the columns that change as you go up. They go from, well, I'm not going to give it completely away, but you may want to write about the graduation of the columns and the different orders that are used as you move up the facade. But really the key that I wanted to point out is it's very subtle, but I think it's important, which is this slight offsetting of the diagonal line. So this is not a 90-degree angle. It's about an 88-degree angle. And this is not a 90-degree angle. It's actually probably like I guess the inverse of if this were 88, this would be a 92-degree angle. And the reason that's done, so all 4 of these projects are within a stone's throw of one another. Okay, that's another very important point, just kind of a key takeaway. You should know by now that Florence is the birthplace of the Renaissance. We've kind of gone over that over and over again. I've cited multiple different examples, things that people reference as the kind of flashpoint or the inception point of the genocide or the Renaissance. I'm sorry. But all 4 of these projects are all within a very concentrated area within Florence. And what I want to point out, I'm going to bring up the map here in a second to really drive the point home and put this into context. But with respect to this line, this building is like half a block away from Santa Maria del Fiore. And there's a direct connection with why the front facade of this building has been pulled back ever so slightly and where the building positions itself relative to this masterwork of Santa Maria del Fiore. So let me move this here. I believe, yeah, you can see it there. I guess I'm kind of giving it away by showing you the Google search. Okay, that building we're looking at is this building right here. Down this block is Santa Maria del Fiore. So this kind of vertical surface that you're seeing translates, it's rotated now 90 degrees clockwise. That vertical surface we were looking at on the map is this horizontal surface. And the intent of what the architect is doing here, and I won't reference the architect's name either. I will leave that to you to understand who it is. But really what the architect is doing is saying, this is an important building. It's for an important family, for sure. But also I want to kind of frame your experience as you move through this street or move down this street to something also very important architecturally, culturally, and historically to us as a society in general, not even just the Romans. So I think that gives you more than enough idea of the things, if you choose to write about that project, the things that I would like you to elaborate on a little bit, which are some of the character defining features of that project. This project, you should know very well. It's really the first non-ecclesiastical work by that architect. And there's a lot of things that the architect is kind of discovering. This is new territory. This is one of the first people creating in this new era that started now for us, because we've gone through already about 150 years of time, but there's going to be about another 150, 200 years where people are going to keep creating in this style, and the style is going to get refined. But it's certainly not refined yet. So we're testing things out. We're in beta. So the use of the colonnade, the portico, the front portico, the sort of regimented rhythm and the spacing of the archways as you move along the front portico is important. The coin elements in between where the arcs come together, and actually coin is not even the right term. Let me give you the right term. The roundels, the roundels are the blue elements. We talked about it in a lecture as to what they represent as well. So you might make reference to that if you're describing the front portico and what kind of dots the columns. Proportion is important here to talk about the relationship of kind of slender and thin to heavy and solid as we talk about the base versus the upper section. The bay, the sort of regimented symmetry and the aligning of the windows, the pedimented windows up top in the upper level with the bays of where the window or the arched opening occurs at the bottom. You can see that that's very kind of systematic and orderly. And then using this diagram, there's a lot of things you can take away with respect to proportion. Remember, we're in humanist Renaissance, and so we're very fascinated with proportion and even more specifically, the human proportion and proportion in nature. So, drawing a relationship with what the architect is doing if you break down the facade into simple geometric shapes, like what's done in the top image. And then if you know this building, you also know probably a little bit about what happens beyond the front entrance and the portico, and you might talk about the cloistering and the open spaces and the arcade around the cloister. Okay, so that's 2. Bottom left is really about the sort of inception point of the Renaissance. I believe I gave you the architect name. So there's really 4 things you can talk about in this pair of slides. You can talk about kind of what happened here and why the people of Florence decided to get rid of what was here to really create this public open space, what the significance of that is, and how the book explains to us what the relationship of that is to the Renaissance and to humanism. So that's one. You can talk about that. You can talk about this building, which is this building here, which in and of itself is not a Renaissance building, but has Renaissance architectural work inside of it in the hall, the public hall that's just to the right here. You can talk about this building, the Loggia building, which is the building kind of in the foreground right, or in the background, I should say, right. Or you can talk about this building, which I believe is, and I'll give you the proper name of that one right now. And actually, I don't mind giving you the name of it now because I don't want you to write about this one. It's not in this slide image. We did talk about it in a lecture. I showed a couple of photographs of it, but really that's not the most important piece. I would focus on really on this would be ideal. Or the public open space or the space on the inside. Yeah, Loggia dei Priori. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yes, we do, and we do know the architect, and I did reference the architect. Well, I'll tell you now, Francesco Talenti. So if you decide to write about this pair, I'd like to see some description of what's happening here. Again, the arched opening, the triple arched opening. You see the roundels appear here again. We have the pediment, we have the corbelling, and the adornment on the upper entablature, really, which horizontally ties together these 3 elements. And the other thing I say in the exam is I want you to tell me what the program is. I don't know if I've explained in detail what that means, and it's quite simple. Program really means what the function of a building is. So if we're doing if I'm building an office building and somebody asks me what's the program, really the program is office function. The function of the spaces inside the building is office. If it's a courthouse, the function is court or law. So program is really a description. It's a program can be a very broad term, but one of the things is the function of the building is considered to be the primary program of that building. So I want you to also tell me, because again, this is you proving to me that you understand you understand the architecture that you're looking at, and you understand what its function is by telling me what the program is. That you know it's a church, or you know it's a cathedral, or you know it's a basilica, or you know it's a courthouse, or you know it's a place for swearing in ceremonies, or you know it's an art gallery, etc. Mercanzia is the name of this one. I just saw it earlier in my notes, but I closed my notes already. Yeah, so the Mercanzia, which was basically the first kind of court dedicated to, we talked about in Florence, the silk merchants and the trades, the sort of fabric trades are thriving in this time. And really there's lots of disputes arising as a result of that as well. So there's really the first kind of building dedicated strictly to hearing cases related to merchant disputes is really what this building is, the Mercanzia. But again, I don't want you to write about this. I prefer you write about this or this or this if you choose these two. Okay, and finally, one of the sort of crown achievements of early Renaissance is this building. The architect you should know quite well. We looked at many of his works. Lots of things we can talk about here. The pointed arches that are arranged kind of 4 and 4 offset wings of the front entry archway, I would say is definitely one, the use of the pointed arch. The front archway, the barrel vaulted archway, is itself an important piece. And since you know this architect, I have shown you the architect kind of struggle with how to do that entrance and have it look Roman and pay homage to kind of Rome's heritage, its very proud heritage. We know the arch is an important sort of a triumphal element in Roman architectural history. So we're trying to bring that into now other types of architecture. I won't give away what the program is, and for those that don't know it, but I suppose everybody knows what this is at this point. But understanding that, the architect arrived at this point after testing a number of other things out with respect to how to do the entry on a building like this. So that might be something you talk about. The large, well, let's just kind of move sequentially up. And actually, even before getting to the midpoint, another thing you might talk about two other things you might talk about just in the lower section is the polychromatic marble, the banding, the 2-color polychromatic banding that you see, or the polychromatic motif. It's not just the banding. The banding is clear on the pilasters off on the wings, but the use of polychromatic marble is actually adorned across the entire facade. So you might talk about that. You might talk about the order of the columns, really the pilasters, not the columns. Any of which would be fair game for the lower section. And then as the lower section transitions to kind of the midpoint, you might talk about the entablature, again, some of the detail work and the shapes and the geometry of the facade there. The proportion, the diagram on the bottom should have some very, very helpful, insightful things as to what the architect is trying to do, or certainly what the architect is using as a reference in developing this design. Um, and so you can see kind of the square expresses itself very obviously in the entablature, but by looking at the diagram below, you should be able to tell me something else about the use of the square, not just in the entablature, but kind of universally in this facade. Moving up, you have the pieces off to either side of the upper wall and the pediment. There's something very deliberate happening there. I've talked about what he's doing. The book has talked about what he's doing, why he's transitioning from this kind of upper piece really to the lower pieces to either side, and really how that relates to what happens beyond. If you talk about that, get into how the facade is really signing or telling us what's happening functionally on the inside. So you might talk about the S-curved volutes. You might talk about that rose window. You might talk about the effect of a trabeated structure in the upper portion. You can see it looks like it's 4 columns, but I think we know what it really is. So you might talk about what that means in terms of expression of trabeated structure. Or you might talk about the upper portion and either the entablature or the pediment or both, and really what the architect is doing, why that's there. What is that referencing? Why has the architect chosen this thing that looks not new, looks like a repeat of something old, and why is that the way it is? So I think that's plenty of information and insight. When I do this class live, we basically spend an entire class session doing a review, and I have taken 45 minutes, 50 minutes of your time. So this will basically stand in place of a lecture. But hopefully, more than anything, I hope that this helps you in knowing more clearly, not just for this upcoming exam that you're going to take, but also for all of the rest of the exams throughout the rest of the semester, the kinds of things I'm looking for you to be able to do when you pick one of these projects and kind of break it down into its parts and really focus in on a few things. Obviously, not everything, just a few things. You're only having to write 3 sentences for each prompt. So it's really not a lot of space. You have to kind of pick something, be comfortable in picking that something, and know that you're identifying a key element that we've talked about, and just really get comfortable in that space and elaborate a little bit on that element. So that's all I have. I look forward to reading the exams. I will release it here in just a few minutes. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Let me know. I will try and have them graded within the next 3 or 4 days before we pick back up with lectures starting next week. Thank you all.